Welcome to People Love Process. Now, I'm recording 2 movies today, and as I said in the previous movie, I'm kind of getting over a cold, so my voice is a little froggy, if you will. So I apologize for that. But we're going to jump into this movie, and within the larger realm of brand identity, you'll find niche categories, whether it's a brand character design or maybe it's a brand pattern in the greater context of all the brand assets being delivered. It could be a badge design, which functions as a secondary brand graphic, or in context of this movie, a monogram design. And this came about because somebody who watches this channel asked me about monogram design, and I said, hey, that's a good topic. So I put this together, and I want to demonstrate the various methods I've used on a range of monogram projects I've worked on and walk you through the base building of shapes and the detailing methods used to produce an asset that'll work for any type of context, whether that's online or whether that's in print. So let's get started. We're going to start with this project. This was a company called Circadian Company. So 2 C's in their name. So that's ideal for a monogram. And we're just going to take this letter form here, and I'm going to go. And by the way, I should point out that yes, in the properties panel, if you scroll down, you can click offset with something selected and get immediate access. So we could do it this way. 20 is way too big, but if we go 6 and we go okay, that give us what we want, change it to an outline. So you can do it that way. I rarely use the properties panel. It's Adobe's way of trying to make things more forward facing and not so hidden in pull down menus, but I don't use it for offset mainly because certain contexts, it won't show that button on the panel if it's a compound path, for example, which is unfortunate. But it's the exact same functionality that if you go to Object, down to Path, down to Offset Path, and open it, same exact thing. So whichever you prefer, you can use. So this is where I start, creating outlines of these 2 letter forms. This is where I'm just going to go ahead and grab a pen tool, and I'm going to create what I call a throwaway shape. A throwaway shape is just a shape for no other reason than to edit or add to an existing shape. So we're going to take this C, and I'm going to intersect it with Pathfinder, and that creates the gap we need for that letter form. And we're going to do one down here like this. Select this offset. Intersect it. Intersect just wherever the 2 shapes overlap, that's the shape it leaves. Once we have this, we can select this C, because I want this C to look like it's going under this C, and we'll minus front. I like to say punch. It just punches through it like a cookie cutter, and we'll do the same thing on the other C like that. So now what we had wasn't bad, but I think this is a lot more engaging to have this kind of interplay between the 2 letter forms that make up this brand mark. Now, the final design in this context, when I show clients work, so this was 8 years ago. Wow, that's a little longer than I thought. But anyway, this was a company that was doing juices, and I think they're now doing coffee as well. But this was one of the directions I presented to them. And I usually present a vertical format as shown here, kind of stacked, and a horizontal because that tends to work better on a website. So we're going to take a look at another one for the exact same project, just a different style. So let's go ahead and click on that. And this is a way you can think about building. Yes, we're creating letter forms, but if I create an element like this gives me all I need for half of it. Well, a C is symmetric, so it could be identical on the other side. So all I'm going to do here is select these 2 elements, clone them, Command-C, Command-F, use the Reflect tool, find a central anchor point. I might use the circle here since this is directly centered on the motif, and reflect it up like that. Then I'd select these 2 shapes, and I just unite them now. So now it's a backwards letter C. We need to create letter C reading the right way. So I'll select the C, select this ornament. I'm going to clone this. And when I say clone, that just means Command-C, Command-F. I have that set up as an F3 keyboard shortcut, because if I didn't, I'd have to go up here and go copy, then pull back down and go paste in front. And that just takes time. So if I just select elements like this and I just go F3, I have a copy. I don't have to do any of that. Then I go to the reflect tool, find a central anchor point, reflect it over, and I'm done. So that's the whole reason I do it. I use keyboard shortcuts. It's just faster, more efficient. Now the background here, we're going to go ahead and color this brown. And then all we're going to do on this one is we're going to color this, and this frill will be this nice pale blue. And we'll go ahead and color these dots blue. And then the opposing one is actually going to be white and no outline, like that. So this was another design. Now, I would add gaps to it. I will add gaps to it, but I'm not going to walk through that since I showed you how to do that. Let's just take a look at the final design. And you can see I added those gaps in here. Although where they meet in the center, those are kind of butt fit together because it looks good. And there's enough contrast with those colors that it works well. This was the final, at least the vertical version of this design. I also did a horizontal for this one as well. That all said and done, they didn't like anything I created for that project. And these aren't even my two best ones. The best one was one where, because it's based off the circadian rhythm and they were doing juices, I worked one that had a moon in it. It was awesome. One of my favorite designs I've ever done, and they absolutely just did not like anything. So that's the way it goes at times. You can do everything right, and a client can still make bad decisions. So that's that. Let's keep moving forward. We're going to look at a complex one. So, of course, I showed you how you can take shapes like this, take letter forms, and you can add gaps like this to those letter forms to create that interactive component with monograms, which is fun. And that's super simple on a flat-based graphics. But if you have something a little more ornate here, where I have multiple outlines and inlines and thicknesses, I'd have to expand everything to build it in much the same way, and that takes time, and I'm not going to go over that. So when I'm creating a design and I want to show that, or show it in context of a comp, let's say, then I just make it easy. I just take a copy of the letter D and then take a mask, and then I just mask that. And by the way, I have a keyboard shortcut for mask, which is F1. If you don't, you would just select both, go up to Object, go down to Clipping Mask, and Make. But I never do that. I just select both, and I hit F1, and it masks it into shape, and I get that nice illusion of it going in and out, and the characters, even though they're complex, are interacting with one another. And so on the comp I sent for this project, this is how that looked. But ultimately, if this was the direction they went with, they actually went with a different direction I came up with, which was fine because that was my favorite design. So that's always good. But I'd want to build it clean. What I mean by that is if I pull this out, you can see this is nothing but shapes, no strokes. And I've built in that gap cleanly, because you'd never want to give final art with masks embedded in it, or all these outlines for that matter, because outlines based off if somebody has a preference by let me just show you and tell you, we're going to go to General under Preferences. And you can see Scale Strokes is clicked on. That's because I always do that. By default, this is off. And if you give somebody a file like this with all these outlines and different thicknesses, and they don't have that checked, then they're going to scale it and it's going to screw up the artwork. So you don't want to do that. So build clean, deliver clean. Your comp can be pretty messy, but just make it look good. And then once they approve it, clean it up and create the final assets. I just noticed that all of these clients are beverage related clients. I didn't realize that until right now. So here's another one. It's a beverage company. I guess they like monograms. Maybe that'd be interesting to look into. But anyway, these guys wanted something very classical. They said they wanted it vintage, but just classical was the word they kept using. So this is where I turned to. There's a great company called Letterhead Fonts, and they have old classic typography fonts that they create. And that's where I got the Romer typeface. I love that typeface. It's just beautiful. And then I just added the insets to it just to make it look more rich. But the monogram that was embedded in this design for their brand mark was the Romer beverage, so RBC. Now, some people say, why didn't you make the C? Well, I just thought I'd get a little too busy with the C and all those ornaments, and company is kind of, that's like an add-on anyway. I did try a gap in this O that goes around it, but that just looked a little bit, I don't know, a little predictable, so I didn't do that either. But then we created a mark that's just the bottle cap, and so that was a fun project to work on. One other type of monogram you can do, it doesn't have to be a beverage company. This isn't. This is for a gaming accessory called Serpent Realm. So I took the letter forms, turned it into snakes, and then just added a nice beveling to them. And you can see some of the graphic styles over here that I used in these to get that blend from a darker purple into the base purple, etc. So what I want to walk you through now is a project where we create a beveling type of design and show you how, if you just think in shapes, it can be pretty simple to figure out. Of course, the process starts in drawing. I prefer analog. If you want to do this digitally on an iPad, by all means do it. Drawing in any context, whether it's analog, digital, you get the same benefit. So whatever you prefer. I learned in analog. I went through school, learned everything traditionally, only got into vectors about 4 years after I graduated from art school. And so I still love pencil and paper and drawing with this nice translucent stock that I buy from Nina. So this is where my process starts. And just to kind of explain my thinking, the theme here is the famous poet T.S. Eliot. So I'm working with T.S., which is the initials of his name, and then is the first letter in his last name, which is Eliot. So T.S.E. And so that's all monogram is deciding what letter forms are embedded within your design, and then just start doing a lot of drawing. Doesn't have to be perfect drawing. This is all going to be geometric, so I'm not taking it any further in terms of clarity than what you see here. So I started drawing it. I drew this one down here, and as soon as I did this, I go, that's stupid. I'm not doing that. I don't like that. I don't like the S going above the T. I think the T needs to fall below it. I tried another one. Well, maybe if I just make it a little different. Nope, that still sucks. And then I started drawing this. And I go, ooh, that kind of has the right feeling. I like that the S isn't all curvy. And then I'm going, but I don't like these serifs. And then I drew it again, and I'm going, oh, that's it. I kind of like that. And that's what the check mark is. That's me going, oh, yeah, that looks good. But what do those serifs look like? And then I said, well, I'm going to draw it out more up here, and kind of worked out, oh, and once I did that, I was going, okay, that's kind of how I'm going to handle it. But I want it nested in something. He was a writer. He is a poet. He was a critic. So maybe a book. Maybe a book kind of hosting shape. But I didn't like that it wasn't symmetric on top and bottom. But I like the top. And that gave me an idea. We'll just flip it around. Just do it on both sides. Have that in the middle. And so once again, check, proved. And this is where I start, and this is where I start moving forward. But the place I start is simple geometry. So we have the base of the T already created here. And I just want to show you how easy it is to do this, because if you think in shapes, it's going to make vector building easier. Whether you're doing a design, whether you're doing monogram, whether you're doing illustration, thinking in shapes is the skill that will make all of that way easier. Actually, even if you're a traditional illustrator, I teach in a Master of Fine Arts program in Hartford, at Hartford Art School in Connecticut every summer. I was there last week, and fabulous illustrators going through the program. Most of them are digital. Most of them do digital painting. But the common denominator in what I'm talking about with shape recognition, that's what they teach in their master's program. Looking at something, deducing something comes down to thinking in shapes. If you can do that, you can draw. If you can do that, you can build. It's a great skill set to develop. Now, one thing I want to show you here is a plugin I use, and I'm going to explain why. Let's go ahead and draw out a new elliptical shape here, and we'll draw a square like this. So in Illustrator, we could select all these anchor points and use a corner widget and create a circle. But why would you do that if you have elliptical shape? So that's kind of silly. But I use this feature to create scallop shapes like this because it's easy and it works good. Or you can isolate a corner and you can just round it however you want, like that. But how would the corner widget work on a circular shape? Well, it doesn't, because it's a circle. That's the way Adobe engineers think. It doesn't have corners, so it doesn't need to work on there. But could it? Well, they don't even ask that because they don't use the software they create. I think that's why they don't ask themselves those questions. And that's why I use plugins, because Astute Graphics, who makes the plugins, they ask themselves that question. So I can select an elliptical shape like this, go to the Dynamic Corners tool, which is this, part of the VectorScribe plugin, has multiple tools in VectorScribe. One of them is Dynamic Corners, and it says, yeah, it's a circle, but why can't you pull out those corners? You know, and so I'll do this all the time. Now, I could have started with the circle and used the elliptical tools, but I'm going to show you one reason why I don't do that, because some of you are probably thinking, well, you could have just started with the circle and gotten the same thing. Well, technically, yes, but or you could have started with a square and gotten the same thing. I mean, you're right, but here's why I don't do the, oops, we need a square. Here's why I don't do it. Yes, I still use this feature with the corner widget to get scallop shapes like this, because that's the one shape that I don't find dynamic corners ideal for. So I go back and forth between the two. And that's the way you should work. Whatever works best for you, whatever you need to do, that's what you should use. Now, the reason why I don't like using the corner widget to do certain kinds of building is because right now, if I go ahead and make a circle, we'll make a circle here, and we'll use the dynamic corners to get the same scallop shape we have going on the one at top, like that. The one I created with the corner widget, notice it's piggybacking. There's a redundant anchor point there. You can see this should only, if we select this shape, this should only have 5 anchor points, but it has 6. And that's because they created this tool so it's not smart enough to know that you wouldn't want this. You'd want it just to be 1. And at times, this can cause problems if you build like this. So I just wanted to point that out. Whereas on Astute, it isn't. It's like they figure that stuff out and it never gets released kind of half-assed like Adobe tends to do. So we're going to take these shapes and continue our monogram design here. And I'm going to fuse these together. And then we'll go back to the rounding tool. And I'm just going to round these like this. And we'll isolate these anchors because I just want to drag it past like that. We'll select these two. We'll go ahead and color it yellow, fill, and unite it like that. We'll select the original shape and we'll minus front with Pathfinder. You might get artifacts. You can just isolate them, delete them. Then I'll take these anchors and I'll just slide these over like that. We'll go ahead and zoom out again. I'm going to take this and clone it, Command-C, Command-F, or F3 if you're using the keyboard shortcuts. And I'm going to find the central anchor point with the reflect tool, reflect the crossbar over of the T. Now notice this is going to have redundant points up here. But in Pathfinder, go to Pathfinder Options, make sure you have this set up. Because if you have this checked and you select shapes like this, it'll get rid of those redundant points. But as you saw with the scallop shape, using the corner widget on a square, it doesn't remove those kind of redundant points. So it's not smart. And I just wanted to point that out. Once I get this design done, this is where I'll just go in, on these, and I'll just round them. So I'll go in and just add a nice little round here on the tips, just so they're not dagger sharp. And I'll do that on all of them. So that's how I'd create the overall shape of the letter forms, in this case the T. But once you have all the letter forms, then I just compose them together. So you can see on the S, I kind of handled it more of a squarish fashion. Even though when it gets in these curves, it's curved. I made it so it goes straight a little bit. It just makes it composing easier rather than all curves. And I think they all work together. Now, to create the bevel, you might be thinking that's hard too. It really isn't. If you look at this shape of the S, if we just focus on the right-hand side edge, that's all we need to focus on. We're going to take that, copy it. You can see here, I didn't keep the curves in it. I just continued the straight line past that edge, the straight line past the bottom. This will give us everything we need. One thing I do in Illustrator a lot is I'll create a shape. If I can't select, like I want to know what thickness this is, but because these flare up, if I select a shape like that, it's not going to give me the right measurement. So I'll create a shape like this based off of the thickness. Then I'll go up and I realize it's 40. I actually did that on purpose because I like working in whole numbers. I always build in points, and I don't want to do math. I don't want to, okay, what's half of 41.7? I don't want to open up the calculator app and figure it out. I try to work in whole numbers because it just makes the process go faster. So I know this is 40 on the thickness of these letter forms, so I can select this shape, and I can go up to Object, I can go to Path, I can go Offset Shape. And by the way, you can do this using the Properties panel too if you want, as I showed you earlier. But I usually do it this way just because I prefer it. This is 6 from the last time we used it. I'm just going to punch in 20. You can preview it. And now it's exactly half. That's exactly what we wanted. So we're going to click OK. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select the S and I'm going to clone it, Command-C, Command-F. So all it did is made a copy of that shape. I'm going to take the shape we offset, I'm going to clone that too. I'm going to select the S that we copied, and I'm just going to go minus front. And now you can see we have everything needed for the left side now. And I'll do the same thing for the right side. So I'll make a copy of the S, take the offset path we initially made, intersect it, and now we can get rid of this because we're done. You can even get rid of that if you want. Now we have everything needed to create the bezel on the bevel that is on this letter form. So that's how I went about doing that. And the S was the hardest one. That's why I chose to show you that. The E and the T are pretty simplified. So that's how I create the beveling on these shapes. Now, I want to have gaps in these letter forms, but I want to create the bezels first because I can go back and trim off gaps on the detailing of the bevel later. And so with these gaps on this design, we want the T to go over the S. So that's what it would do here. And we had minus front. And then we'd want the S to go over the E here. So we'd take that, go E minus front. And this is where the T will go under this E. So now we'll edit the letter T itself. Now, when you make these kind of edits to create your gaps, Figuring out the tolerance first is important, so you have that continuity retained as you go through. The other thing is, when you edit a shape like this, this now is no longer a regular vector shape. It's considered a group. So I always go back and I always turn it into a compound, because if you make another edit on something, let's say it's the S, and even though, let's go ahead, what we're going to do is I'll go ahead and let's see, I'll do this. I wasn't planning on this, but I think it's important to show you because I know it confused me for a long time. And I used freehand for 15 years before I came to Illustrator. And it like kind of confused me. So let's say at the bottom, I went to the wrong spot. Let's say go like this. There we go. So let's say at the bottom you wanted the S to go over the T. So this would be the shape to create that gap. So you want to edit this T again. But right now, if we go to the appearance panel, it's a compound path. This one is, okay, I kind of goofed up there. I meant to go the other way. So we're going to do that instead. There we go. Kind of got confused there for a second because I want the S. Let's say we want the S to go behind the bottom of the T here. The reason why I'm showing you this is because if I select the S, notice it's still a group. It's not a compound path. So if I go ahead and edit this with this using Pathfinder and we go minus front, it's going to lose stuff. And that's the frustrating part. So I just wanted to show you that so you're aware of it. And that's why I always take shapes like this and I use F7 as a keyboard shortcut. And if we go to appearance panel to change it from a group to a compound. And I set up the F7 key to do that because I was doing that all the time. And if you're zoomed in on something, you're not paying attention, you zoom out, all of a sudden half your design is gone because you continued to make edits or whatever and it didn't retain them. I did that. And I did that several times. I couldn't figure out what is going on. And then I realized, I figured it out, it was because of this. Now, freehand never had that problem. It always retained the compound nature even after editing, and it only removed it when you told it to remove it. And I don't know why Adobe is so resistant to doing that, because everybody I know and ever met have ran into this problem, and it should be fixed, but they don't consider it a bug. So I just wanted to point that out. Let's keep moving forward. So we have all of our gaps figured out now in our artwork, and we've built all the bevels, and we edited it with those gaps, and that's what these look like here. And so all it comes down to at this point is figuring out what to color our letter forms, what to color the bevels. Well, in this design, I want the background to be gold. The typography is going to be white, and my beveling, the gold color itself is a global color. Any color that has a white triangle in the bottom right means it's a global color. So gold is a global color. So what I want to do is I want to use global colors to create the shading in this. But these global colors, once you have something as a global color, if I click on the gold, not the outline, let's go fill. If I click on the global color and go to color tab here, this T represents tint. And you can select this, whatever object you color it, and you can select this. Let's go ahead and do that. So if I go here, and I'm going to go ahead and fill this with gold, get rid of the outline like that, but I don't want it solid gold for obvious reasons. Well, then I'm going to go to color here, and I can adjust the tint. So let's say I decide this should be 35. Then we can select this, and maybe This one's that color. And like a good cooking show, I have some graphic styles set up like that. And I'm going to go back to this shape, and we're just going to color it. I think it was, yeah, it's 40, not 35. And this is how I do it. Now, I have other shapes in here like the S, where if I select on this and go to the gradient, you can see I'm going from a tint of the gold to white. And that creates that nice shading here. And I do it down here as it moves into this curve and comes up out of the bottom. Now, you could handle it like that. Or because I have some chisel areas going, especially in the T where the base meets the crossbar at the top, it creates this nice kind of chiseling. And so I pick that up also in the E. And on the corners, I decide not to handle it the same way because the S is more forgiving. It has a curve on the inside and the outside, whereas the E only has a curve on the outside and it's a corner on the inside. So I thought this beveling looked better handling it this way on those letter forms. But this is the final coloring on this. But the final context for this design was nested within that book shape I had sketched out like this. And this was a logo I did because I noticed T.S. Eliot had a society, a group that talks about his work or writes in the same fashion or just has an interest in him. And I thought that was cool, but oh boy, their logo was really bad. And this guy was a brilliant writer. So I pitched him on this logo and they didn't go for it. So there you go. That's the way it goes at times. But when I create a design like this, I'm always looking to make it more useful in whatever context. So let's say they were doing some big banner. Maybe it's a T.S. Eliot conference. I don't even know if they have those, but they could have a nice large photograph. And here I simplified this design down into one color. This is just white with transparency sets applied to the areas within the bevels of the monogram itself. But you can see it works really good on any colored background. We could change this colored background. It could be black and it'd look good on it. It could be another color, solid color. It'd look good on it. So it makes it more useful if you could do that. So I don't do a lot of monogram design, but they are always fun to work on. Hopefully these methods are ones you can implement into your own workflow. I want to thank those who have shared my link to my YouTube channel on their social media. I really appreciate that. And if you subscribe, you'll be notified of the most recent content when posted. Thank you for watching People of Process. I hope this content helps you improve your own creative process.